Steganography is a form of covert communication that has been used since ancient Greek times, according to the Greek historian Herodotus. Unlike a regular code, which employs cryptological techniques to hide the contents of the message, steganography hides the message by placing it in plain sight, often in a way that simply escaped the notice of the casual onlooker.
When people are using steganography, what they're also trying to do is hide the fact that they're sending a message. So they not only want to hide the contents of the message, they want to hide the fact that the message is being sent at all.
For example, to hide a message written on a stone tablet, ancient people would coat the stone with wax, making it appear as though the tablet was blank. Once the wax was melted off, the secret message would be revealed. More recently, steganography can be found in letters, emails, and even digital images. Because steganography used common items to hide codes, it was an ideal way for spies to communicate without arousing suspicion. The art of steganography was used to great effect during World War II by spies to communicate secret messages in plain sight on familiar forms of communication. One of the earliest recorded instances of steganography comes from Herodotus's The Histories. Aristagoras of the Ionians was planning a revolt against the Persian king who was in control of his city, but he was hesitant to do so. Histiaeus, who was also helping with the revolt, wanted to send a message encouraging Aristagoras to revolt in a discreet way, so he chose a dependable slave, shaved the slave's head, and tattooed the message onto his head so that once his hair grew back, the message would be hidden. Aristagoras received the slave and was instructed to shave the slave's head, revealing the command to begin the revolt.
Another important historical figure is Johannes Trethymius, one of the first examples of writers using steganography in their text. He was a well-known abbot of the church, historian, and magician. As can be imagined, it came as no surprise when he wrote Steganographia, a 3-volume book that appeared to be about the practice of magic. However, these books were not about the communication between spirits. 100 years after Trethymius had written his books, it was discovered that the third of the volumes was the decryption key to the first 2. Despite the time it may have taken to be discovered, this information made it quite clear that his books were an example of an entirely different, non-supernatural form of communication, steganography.
Phyllis Latour Doyle, a spy for Britain in World War II, used knitting as a form of code. Women were encouraged to knit during the war to provide clothes for the soldiers, making it an easy way to cover secretive behavior. Phyllis was sent into Normandy, which was flooded with Nazis at the time, to gather information about their positions. She pretended to be a teenager and talked with the Germans there so that she could send the information back to Britain. The codes she sent were stitched into fabric, the various stitches corresponding to enemy movements or even Morse code. Another example of a brave woman who communicated using steganography to help their cause in World War II is Corrie ten Boom. When the Nazis began to kidnap and wrongfully imprison Jews, Corrie took matters into her own hands. While hiding Jews behind a secret panel in her home, she had to be able to communicate over the phone without sounding suspicious, as there could be spies listening at any time. To do this, Corrie used steganography. As the owner of a watch shop, she would use common phrases that might be said about a watch, and therefore wouldn't arouse suspicion, to indicate the situation of a particular Jewish person she was hiding. Corrie's biography, The Hiding Place, provides these examples. Quote,
"We have a woman's watch here that needs repairing, but I can't find a mainspring. Do you know who might have one?"
This roughly translated to, "We have a Jewish woman in need of a hiding place, and we can't find one among our regular contacts."
"I'm sorry, but the child's watch you left with us is not repairable. Do you have the receipt?"
Which roughly translated to, "A Jewish child has died in one of our houses. We need a burial permit." These secret codes are living proof that communication through steganography has directly impacted people's lives in powerful ways.
Today's threat to our national security is not a matter of military weapons alone. We know of other methods, new methods of attack, spies, saboteurs, and traitors. With all of these, we must and will deal vigorously.
Velvely Dickinson, a small American woman in her 40s, was unusually interested in Japanese culture. She was a part of the Institute of Japanese American Society and attended various social gatherings where Japanese officials were present. Velvely was also the owner of a doll shop in New York, which became well known and respected by other doll enthusiasts. Because she sold dolls to many wealthy people, she would often write letters to her clients about her dolls. Oddly, some of her letters were drawing attention, as the date and location of where the letters were sent from would be incorrect and inconsistent. It was February of 1942, and one of Velvely's letters was turned in to be inspected because of its strange contents. The letter was one of several that were being given to the FBI by multiple people, all of whom had had contact with Velvely. The agents began to decode the letters, and they concluded that the dolls mentioned in the letters were actually referencing warships. At first glance, the letters contained innocent information about dolls and Dickinson's personal life. However, when decoded, the letters reported the condition of U.S. ships and their positions. If these suspicions were true, it would be a serious threat to the United States' national security, especially because this was all happening right after Pearl Harbor. Agents started to go to Velvely's shop and monitor her as suspicions were rising, and they discovered her connection to the Japanese. This was enough evidence, and she was immediately arrested. After a few interrogations, Dickinson admitted to coding her letters and confessed the way she did it. She would go to shipyards and talk to the people there to slowly gather information about the ships damaged at Pearl Harbor. Then, in her letters, she would use words or phrases about the dolls that signified the location, condition, or recovery of the American ships. To further disguise the letters, she forged some of her most esteemed customers' signatures onto the letters to make it appear that they were the ones who sent them. For confirmed espionage for the Japanese government, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. If Velvely had not been caught by the FBI, her letters could have had a significant impact on Japan's success in the war. When Japan was planning to expand their military empire into the Pacific during World War II, they knew that their best chance to neutralize the American fleet would be to mount a surprise attack. Admiral Yamamoto had been planning the attack for months, hoping that it would destroy America's fleet and give the Japanese time to take advantage of the resources in the Pacific. Velvely, who was recruited by the Japanese before the attack to spy on the United States, gave Japanese military planners essential information about which ships were docked in the harbor, setting the stage for the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor. It was even reported that a Japanese naval officer was seen giving Velvely a bundle of money and telling her that they couldn't meet in Honolulu a couple days before the attack. If Velvely had been able to continue communicating with the Japanese government through steganography, Japan could have known how quickly the U.S. was recovering from the attack, and she could have provided critical intelligence on the possible arrival of America's aircraft carriers, which barely managed to survive the bombing. Had the Japanese known when the aircraft carriers were arriving, and they had destroyed them also, the Battle of Midway would have never happened, and Hawaii, Alaska, and the coast of California would have been open to a Japanese attack. This would have changed the course of the war in the Pacific, and even the course of World War II overall.
Now, why is it steganography? It's in plain sight. There's nothing encrypted, nothing being hidden, yet it's hard to find that. And if you do not have the original image, then you're not going to be able to detect it.
Many modern decryption devices can easily reveal hidden messages written in letters or spoken over the phone. However, just as our decryption devices have evolved, so has steganography. Steganography today can be sent in images, videos, or any other digital files. Modern steganography contains messages that can be hidden under pixels or text, and is virtually undetectable except to those who are looking for it.
Okay, so I've got a way to hide it. Now, can I hide it in such a way that it's hard to tell I've hidden it, not just to people looking at a picture or listening to music or watching a TV show, but for people using sophisticated tools to scan the data?
In this way, steganography can be used by individual spies, hackers, or even large government organizations to convey important pieces of information without alerting any potential adversaries. Despite its ancient origins, steganography is still relevant and can be used to communicate discrete messages all over the world.